Almost live from the CX Therapy Studio, CX Therapy Season 4.
Good, Max. How are you doing today?
Oh, doing well, Julien. It's bright and sunny and early here. How are you this evening? How is the City of Lights? How's Paris?
Well, you know, it's still kind of summertime. It feels hot, which I like. Means that the days are very long, which I like. But it gives you way more opportunities for bad customer experiences, which I don't quite like.
True enough.
But hey, European life. Actually, talking about European life, before we dive into what we're going to touch on today, did you get a follow-up on Dave's story last week? And I'm saying that because he's a Portuguese-born American by now, living the dream on the Portugal coast. So, did you get any feedback following his story? Do you have anything in the mailbag?
Yes, we definitely have a mailbag.
Now it's time to open this week's mailbag.
Alrighty.
I have it right here, the mailbag. Let's see what's inside here. Got the mail. Thank you for the sender here, another anonymous sender.
Still waiting for a fax one day. I want to see if your mailbag receives a fax.
I'm working on it. It's not easy. My wife said we have to reinstall the landline before I can do a fax, so it's going to be just a little bit there. But so Dave had issues in a hotel trying to get an answer to a couple of pretty basic questions. One was just a conference room and being able to find that. And the question that we got here was there was a really strong disconnect from what he was doing, what the centralized Marriott could find, and then what was going on in the hotel when he talked to somebody at the desk, etc. And the question is, are there better ways to get the hotel itself in sync with whatever the centralized contact center is? Which that was kind of an interesting thing to kick around a little bit.
Well, he was talking about a chain, right? So I'm guessing you got a centralized contact center covering multiple hotels, each of those hotels being a maze of its own, because it sounded like it was a gigantic hotel, not the typical boutique hotel I'd like to go to. So I understand it would be a challenge. I mean, depends if you're calling a contact center or if it was a hot desk. Was it the desk downstairs, or was it the contact center?
That's the issue. Is with the chat, they were escalating to a centralized group, and that went nowhere. So then he called the hotel, and then he got somebody at the desk. Two absolutely disconnected, unrelated experiences. And that's a hard one. I mean, how would you do a screen pop from a chat at a different contact center to a front desk in a hotel? It's not a straightforward issue to solve.
I don't know. I mean, if IVRs can do this, there is no reason nowadays, especially with or without a chatbot, that you can't get your digital IVR doing the screening for you and sending the conversation to the right person. I mean, if your front desk is able to pick up the phone, they are able to answer a digital question. I told you the story 2 years ago now of, what was it, Ibis Hotel in London that is now answering on WhatsApp. It was in your room, they have the QR code to scan, and then you have a conversation with a front desk over WhatsApp, which I find super convenient, because even when you're outside in the street and thinking, oh, could you guys prepare some fresh towels for me? You do it from your WhatsApp in the street. You don't have to wait to go back to your hotel room, or sorry, forgot to remove the sign, but could you please send someone to clean up the room? I mean, this kind of stuff, incredibly convenient when you can have it over digital. So it's doable.
That's a good point, and that's much better. Really, a chat experience with the front desk probably makes a lot more sense in general, because it's easier for me working the desk to kind of be, oh, hey, let me just real quick do this, kind of multitask conversation with somebody there instead of just you're on hold, you're dead, or you can't get anybody to answer, or you're, and then, you know, at that point, yeah, you can share the context, you can move things back and forth. That would actually be really elegant way to handle that.
I think it would be, and even basic chatbots now have the ability to at least categorize a type of conversation you want to have, so we send you to the right person. I don't think every person within the contact center is expected to know by heart the entire mapping of each hotel, especially as they keep changing the name
obviously not.
Of the rooms. So you could either have a very nicely done knowledge base that's super easy for the agent, eventually pump it up with a little bit of AI to make it even simpler, or better yet, keep that human touch and talk to your front desk. You actually gave me a good transition with your being on hold part here, because today as usual, I'd like to share some fresh stats with you. And we've talked quite at length about customer expectations and all of that. But today I'd like to talk about 3 different metrics and benchmarks that I found for 2023. Ready for that?
Please.
So the first one I've got for you is this one. 4 hours and 42 minutes is the benchmark for first response time. It's kind of a weird way to put it, because whether you're talking about emails or whether you're talking about WhatsApp or whether you're talking about phone, those first response times are going to be widely different. I think it would be fair to assess that for emails is usually around 24 hours, while for WhatsApp you expect that at least during working hours it's going to be a few minutes at most. But the benchmark, the average, all channels together, was 4 hours 42 for 2023. And I found it incredibly interesting to compare the data to what Zendesk was saying back in 2012, before we had all those fancy channels. And back then, we were talking about a 24 hours average response time. But that's a time when email was more important than any other channel when it came to digital. How do you feel about that statistic?
It makes me feel so good about email going away. More than anything else, as a channel, it has never made sense to me being, because how often is it that 24-hour wait time is going to be, oh, here's 3 clarifying questions. And if that's another 24, it's just such a horrible way to do service. It's so slow. It's so non-responsive.
It's great that you mentioned that, because there is one thing I don't like about FRT as a metric. The first response could be the right answer, or it could just be, "Hi there, how may I help you?" In which case, it's no value, and you've been waiting 4 hours, 42 minutes for pretty much nothing, because the conversation has not really started quite yet. Which is why the second stat I wanted to bring up, also from 2023, is 24 hours being the average resolution time as a benchmark, all industries together. It's if I remember correctly, it's mostly US-centric. I don't think it's global. How do you feel about this one?
So this is from when I reach out to my ticket is solved or my issue is solved.
It's not, and that's the beauty of it. That's the problem I have with that one. It is how many working hours it took for the employees within the contact center to actually answer your question, which is very different from how much time have you waited as a customer, because we don't count, all the other elements like holidays or weekends or off office hours or all this kind of stuff. The calculation, if I recall properly, is total number of hours that were required for your entire contact center people to answer all, call it tickets, within that time frame, and that gives you an average.
So that's the amount of work that went into doing something. That could have been over a week, that could have been over a month, it couldn't be less than a day, since it's 24 hours. Well, I guess it could be multiple people. So Am I understanding that right?
This is something that's widely used and that I feel a little bit confusing because that's a very internal centric kind of metric. It doesn't tell anything from the customer perspective. It tells a lot about whether you're being efficient and whether you're spending too much time per ticket in average. It's even more interesting when you start bringing it to an agent level so that you can compare, this agent closes 15 tickets a day while the other is on 2 tickets a day. But from a customer perspective, I find it kind of lacks.
Yeah, it's great for staffing planning and understanding efficiency, which you need. I mean, I don't think it's a worthless stat. You're right; it is completely internal facing, but you still need to know how long stuff is taking and who's being good at doing the background work or not. So I don't think it's a worthless stat, but I think it's definitely as far from customer centric as a stat could be.
So that leads me to my third one, which is my favorite metric of all time.
Wow.
And that's also my 2023 benchmark. Now we're talking about FCR. How many times did you and I talk about FCR in the past? So FCR is first call resolution when you talk about call center, or contact resolution when you're talking about digital. And it's basically your ability to fix a problem, answer the question within the first discussion. So for phone, it's pretty easy. Is before I hang up the phone, did I fix your problem or not? When it comes to messaging conversations, it's a much harder metric to consider because when is a contact over, basically? Is it after one message?
Even on the phone, but people can get off the phone before somebody has a chance to ask them if it was solved. What do you do if someone says yes there and 2 minutes later they call back because they realize no, it wasn't solved? It is my favorite productivity measure, efficiency measure, but its flaw is it is very hard to measure, to define, I guess is the way to say it. So it cuts a little both ways, but it is definitely the most impactful stat.
And that is when I think we're going to be talking about this in a few minutes anyway. But this one I find very interesting because 68%, it means that in average, again, I think it's very US centric. I don't think this one is global. But in average, 68% of conversations are being solved within the first interaction or the first contact or the first call. Which brings a question, do companies actually calculate this number right? Because definitely not 68% of my engagement with businesses are being solved within the first interaction. I think that's not my experience. I'm pretty sure it's not yours either.
Yeah, you may find the numbers higher because you did something quickly in self-service somehow, and maybe they're counting that and you didn't even think of it as an interaction. But yeah, that I wish I wish it was that high. I mean, what's going to get thrown in there is every single simple thing. So you're right. I don't feel like it's that, but I don't trust my memory because I think I remember the painful stuff I go through and I just forget the quick answers.
Well, let's see what our guest will have to say about this. Ready to welcome someone on stage?
I am ready to welcome someone on stage.
And now, please welcome this week's guest, a true CX expert.
Christina McAllister, one of my favorite someones to invite onto the stage. Christina and I work together at Forrester. We are the customer service team there.
We are.
There's a whole lot of stuff and a whole lot of people that want to
talk. Just the two of us.
Oh, just the two of us. That's right. We've only known each other about not even 3 years yet, but it feels like family at this point. Yeah, it's been a lot of blood, sweat,
every day for almost 3 years. So
yes, that's right. Every day. So I wanted to pick up on that last stat that Julien had.
Yeah, I'm very excited about all of them.
Yeah. You did some really interesting work in a report that I cite constantly around different metrics and how it actually impacts SAT, and even using the customer experience index, how that might impact spend. Tell me a little bit about first contact resolution within your money on the table stuff.
So Forrester CX Index looks at all the different drivers of how a customer perceives an experience. And yes, the contact center is part of that. It looks at a whole bunch of other stuff. But it turns out that the customer service drivers, things related to the contact center, are a lot of the most impactful stuff. And the ones that I really dug into when I first joined Forrester, I was like, this seems important. And so I wanted to kind of dig into it a little bit more. Was the agent answers all of my questions. The company resolved my issue on the first contact or quickly. There's kind of both sides of that. And then the agent had the autonomy or was empowered to resolve the issue without going to a supervisor, something like that. And so that driver, the first contact resolution driver, essentially is a bit squishy because I think it's a perception thing. I think the consumer, what does quickly mean? It might mean a number of different things depending on if it's a healthcare issue, they might think that quickly is within the week, or who knows what depending on the complexity. But those are the three things that customers actually care about. They care about how that experience goes in the contact center, whether things are resolved quickly or within that first contact. And like you guys were saying, they're taking credit for some stuff. I think most contact centers are taking some credit for they're fudging the math a little bit most of the time. We'll talk about that later, but that's a common problem.
We share something in our background, which is being an SE.
Yeah.
How does that impact your life as an analyst?
Yeah, so I was a sales engineer on the vendor side for contact center tech for a long time. And it impacts my life as an analyst and also just as a person in the world dealing with contact centers and customer service, I think, where it's I know how hard it is to deploy these technologies well. So when clients will come in and speak to us at Forrester and they're, looking at all the wild world of, in your case, chatbots and CCaaS or digital channels like messaging, chat, and that sort of thing. It's not easy to move from a email ticketing in the example, since we were talking about it, the email ticketing universe to start getting into Apple Business Messages and, SMS and all of these different kinds of things. So I think it gave me a pretty solid reality check on how sticky it tends to be and what those use cases tend to look like and all of that good stuff.
All right, you get my favorite question, which I stole from Art Scholler, who we both know. No kid at 8 years old, when asked, what do you want to be when you grow up, says, I want to work in customer service and contact centers. So how did you get here?
I mean, as teenage Christina did work in customer service. And so I lived in a small town in Northern Ontario, and there were not that many jobs to be doing in the summer. So I worked at Blockbuster, I worked at the grocery store, I worked at pharmacies. And so I had a lot of experience just as a customer service frontline representative, not in contact center, but in person. Then I did an outbound sales, dial for dollars. We had a gong and a music, when you got a deal. It was a nightmare. I hated it. It was the worst job ever. But that got me into understanding the hell that is being scripted, the outbound kind of throughput measures and all of that good stuff, and just being your manager plugging into your headset and whispering things in your ear, which I'm oh my God. Yeah, be quiet. I'm trying to do my job. But from there, I ended up doing inside sales for, I'll say a chatbot company. It was the precursor of that. It was early NLP in 2012 and that sort of thing. But I had a handle on what customer service is all about. Having done it, I had a handle on what it felt like to be on the phones. And the worlds kind of collided in an interesting way, but that's kind of how that happened. And as you guys probably know, you can try to leave this space, it never lets you leave.
That's a good one.
I always think of Al Pacino and Godfather 3. They keep sucking me back in.
I worked as an SE for a couple other different kinds of technologies, but even at those companies, like there was a contact center-ish use case, and I'm like, oh, you would. but I'm good at it, so what the heck, right? You just can't beat them, join them, or whatever.
So I actually have a question for the both of you, and usually I don't do that, but today I could not resist. I have a trick question for the both of you, something you're not allowed not to know the answer.
Okay. Uh-oh.
What is a percentage of companies that can be categorized as customer obsessed in the US right now?
That can be or that are?
That are, well, it depends on the definition, I guess, according to Forrester, that are categorized as customer obsessed.
I'm going to break your rules. I don't know the stat on that one.
I know it's low. I'm going to say 7.
I was insanely surprised. So I found this just last week. So by the time this episode airs, it's not going to be last week. That's probably going to be 2 months ago. But there was that report from Forrester that just got released a few days ago. And the number is crazy to me. 3% of companies. It's crazy, not because I don't believe it.
No.
But because of how sad it is.
Yeah.
3% of companies are currently categorized as customer obsessed, defined as putting customers' needs, desires, and satisfaction at the forefront of all business decisions and actions. That should be 97%. That should not be 3%.
Oh, yeah. And then we have a number of different kind of like spectrums on like the way that we look at this, but it is unfortunately not surprising to me anyway, but it is a bummer to see, especially, and this is not just about the contact center, by the way. This is about just like all of the decisions that you might make across like the entire business related to your customer's experience. But I bet if you pulled contact centers, it'd be even smaller.
Yeah, this ties to something we were talking about a little bit ago with the customer experience index and the depressing reality that in 24, it's now declined 3 years in a row and is at the lowest we've ever had it. I mean, oh my goodness, we could do a 6-hour discussion on that. I shouldn't. It's such a big, but it's a tough time to be a customer right now. Honestly, brands are struggling.
But you know what's really killing me here? I don't know if it's readable, so I'm going to put it full screen again. This is a bit that I put at the bottom. That's from the Forrester report.
Yeah.
Customer-obsessed organizations reported 41% faster revenue growth, 49% faster profit growth, and 51% better customer retention, which, I mean, customer retention, seriously, that should be top of mind for any company at this point. Than those at non-customer obsessed organization. That should be the obvious thing to do. Care more about your customers and bring them into the decision-making process. Listen to them, look at them, consider them. It's kind of sad that this is what it comes to.
I had a harsh reality moment around that at a Forrester conference recently. I talked to a company that sells cars. And they were talking about, it's a rough moment and they're trying to manage costs. And they tried to make an argument about customer retention, selling more. The average person buys one car every 8 years.
Yeah.
So when I'm in a thing of I need to control my costs versus I want to make my customers happy so they'll buy another one, but that payoff isn't for 8 years. It's
8 years and how many different individuals who own that task and that measurement. It becomes brutally hard to say, of course we want to do that.
Now, net promoter and things like that is another argument with it, but it can be so hard, just the reality of justifying it.
Fair, but your car dealers don't represent 97% of the companies out there. So even if you were taking those exceptions out, even then, I think when you pay the price you pay for a car, it's still worth the effort.
Obviously, companies who sell stuff every week are not doing it with that number.
Exactly. I feel it's time for a reality check. So let me just call story time.
Gather around, folks. It's time for Guest CX Story.
So, Christina, thank you so much again for joining us. We've heard the pain in your voice when you were talking about the story, but we haven't heard the actual story yet. So if you don't mind lying on a therapy couch, just tell us what happened.
Absolutely. And it was painful, I will tell you. I made some notes of the timeline because I didn't want to forget, and it was that painful that it's worth remembering. So this all started, I made an order. It was retail, like an e-commerce thing. I was buying new lights for my living room. We moved many years ago, and we just take a little while to get organized on that kind of thing. And so I ordered the lights on April 13th and immediately recognized, I'm like, oh, I don't know if could have been me. It could have been the website. I don't really know, but the color was wrong. And there was a note saying the lead time was going to be like, they weren't going to be sending it till May anyway. So I'm like, okay, I have, I'll just like email them. It'll be not a big deal at all. And we can get the color switched up. So I email them and I immediately get the kind of, ticketing, auto ticketing kind of response back saying that the SLA is 3 days for a response. And I was like, well, okay, 3 days, well, whatever. So I was like, okay, that's okay. And then so many reps later, this person was basically like, sorry, nothing I can do. I'm like, what do you mean? No, sorry, there is something you can do because we haven't even sent it out yet. It hasn't gone to processing. I know it hasn't because the email said it hasn't. There was a lot of like back and forth, mind you, every back and forth 3 days. So like this is going on for days. And so this individual, after every time that they would answer me something, I would get like, thanks for talking to us. Do you want to have a survey about how speaking with this person? And I'm just kind of like, what do you mean? And so I'm looking at the survey and there's like nothing to say about the experience. It's just about the agent. I'm just kind of frustrated about that. So then I open a new ticket because they don't answer your old ticket anymore now that it's closed. And so I'm asking questions like, wait, I want to cancel. Like, I don't know what we need to do, but I just want to change this. I've spent enough money on these freaking lights. Like, let's just get this organized. And so eventually she's like, yeah, okay, we can cancel the order and then you can't change it, but we can cancel it. And I'm like, okay, cancel the whole order. And then I'll just rebuy everything. It's not a big deal. Like that's honestly the easiest thing in the world for me to do. Just like click a few things and then add it to my cart. She canceled just the 2 lights. I had also purchased a quilt and the bulbs, fancy bulbs for the light, but she still kept the bulbs and the quilt on the order. And so I'm going to get bulbs for the lamps that I don't have. And then a quilt, which I do want, but it's still like it's shipping to Canada and all this nonsense. So I was like, wait. And so I'm trying to talk to these people to be like, did you cancel the whole order? Because if you did, then like you owe me money. And if you didn't, then we have a problem. So like either way, there's something wrong. Another person comes in, another email, like another kind of like half nonsense resolution or whatever, where they're just like, yep, this is what happened. And then like, thank you for, chatting with us. They didn't have any other channels where I would have used them. And at the end of it all, every once in a while, I was kind of just resigned to my fate, more or less. I was just like, well, whatever, I guess this is just like what it is. But then I would get in an occasional mood where I'd send another email to be like, hi, is anyone ever going to answer me? Is anyone ever going to answer me? And there'd be like 7 days, 8 days. It finally got resolved May 30th. So like April 13th to May 30th. And I eventually got someone who was a supervisor to respond to me, very apologetic. Meanwhile, like 2 weeks ago was when I asked to speak to a supervisor, but that's fine. So they agreed, okay, we're going to let me buy. Like I would buy the lamps again and they would refund the shipping on that order. And then they also gave me an additional 10% as an appeasement. And so they used that word. That was not my word. They used that word. And it was very apologetic and all of that. Then, of course, they launched a bunch of surveys to get a sense of like, did we fix it? Hopefully we fixed it for you. So they were trying to, like, at that point, it was service recovery. They moved into service recovery mode, I think. But that was the most frustrating retail experience I've ever had. It was like such an easy thing that took more than a month, April 13th to May 30th, to get everything resolved. And I still haven't gotten my lamps, by the way. But, we'll get them at some point. We'll see.
So when you're saying April and May, are you talking 2024? Because it does sound like a story back from the 2015, 2016.
I was going to say, I looked at the metrics you were sharing, the 24.2 hours in 2012 from Zendesk. It so happens that I know exactly which ticketing platform they were using, and maybe the metrics are a little bit different. I don't know.
So my first reaction is, in 2024, should we still be using ticketing at all for customer-facing inquiries? I love ticketing for internal processes when it comes to, I hate it, but it does make a lot of sense. Whether it's for your technical issue, make a request to a different department, track processes and progress, sure. But for customers, I have the feeling that for the past decade or so, we finally recognize that customers are people, and that is worth having conversations with people versus this is my numbers, this is who I am. I am file 123 ABC, problem solved, ticket closed, move on until you become a number again. I hate this approach, and I don't think there's so many companies still doing much external ticketing, though. Is it?
Well, I mean, anyone using email for customer service on the traditional case management platforms are. How many people choose email? I would say that there's like a lot fewer companies that only have email these days. That's an unusual choice. But the email to me does not make a lot of sense for the kind of like, I'll say like micro async, like just things where it's just like, I have to we need to have a little bit of back and forth to get this resolved. Whereas like if it's something that's, is going to take, like you said, it might be still customer facing, but if I have to deal with something to get changed with the bank and I have to get sent to some sort of specialized individual, I understand they don't work at the contact center, then I'm fine with that. And allows them, I know that it allows them to kind of track me in their systems and whatnot, but ticketing is broken, I would say, for sure.
I first of all, I completely agree with that. Second, I don't think, if you want to go with emailing, why not? If you really need to get people to wait for 3 days because there is no way around, well, you already have a major problem to deal with, but again, why not? But then once a person is in the queue and has nicely waited 3 days, first of all, don't close the ticket right after. That is insanely frustrating. And then put that person on the top of the queue so that you can have that conversation, if not live, at least fast asynchronous, not waiting 3 days. It feels like you're writing letters, going to the post office.
Right? I could have gotten mail correspondence done probably faster than this.
Your facts that you wanted to do.
The thing that drove me nuts is that I know that they're just closing the ticket the second that they've done a response. They've equated it as I've responded and therefore this is closed. Usually those solutions will pop off a survey afterwards when it's resolved, right? The ticket is closed. I, as the insider lunatic that I am, was basically stop closing my ticket. We're not done. We're not done. I'm going to put it at the top of every new email, just do not close this until we've had this resolved. And I want a resolution, not just an answer. And then I would give the thing. Of course, they did it anyway, but they didn't listen to me. But
what do you attribute that to? Is that a process issue? The company has told contact center agents that as soon as you answer, you close the ticket, or even they automated it. Maybe it's not even the agent doing that. Or is it the agents are under such pressure to close as many tickets as possible that they know they should not do it, but hey, I need to hit my target by end of quarter to get my bonus or whatever it is?
I think it's that, because it doesn't make sense for it to be anything else. I think that their incentive structure, whatever it is, whether it's just metrics or the way that their manager coaches them, or they might even work for a BPO and they might have, the BPO might be paid based on resolutions. There's a lot of different reasons why you would do this, but it felt to me there's no other good reason than no one could look at that and say this was resolved. So I have a hard time thinking that that would be an intentionally developed process, but maybe it is, and they are that much more in need of help. I'm not sure.
Sorry. I keep thinking about question answer 3 days. This is an 8-minute phone call, if not 3.
Right.
Or
chat. We know how much they cost to do this. And I'm just like, I guess I'm going to cost you another like $7. Let me like $7 coming right up. Like this is just like, it's
just the insanity of it is if I were you, I probably, Julien's automated and done things like this. I probably would have just sent 5 emails asking about it just out of spite all at once.
Oh, I was, I did not do that. I started opening new cases. I used a different email to open a new case, like just so that it's like, no, I'm making this really annoying for you. You're going to have to merge me. Deal with it.
Deal with it. Have fun.
Now we're talking the same language. I love that. Did you actually answer any of their surveys to show that it was... No, you did not solve my problem. Did you answer each survey you received?
Yes, but the problem, and this is like one of my personal pet peeves, is that the survey asked specifically about my experience with, this isn't their name, but like with Andy, the agent, right? Like how did you like speaking with Andy, or how did you like your experience with Andy? And it's like, even if this might be like an incentive problem, I don't blame them. I don't blame them for this, like independently. So I would put the thing as like a 1 star so that it would launch me into the experience properly. But then there was a bunch of questions just specifically about them. And all of the comment fields, not that I don't know if they were going to read them. I guess they might have if this, appeasement guy ended up showing up. But but I was always saying, like, it has nothing to do with Andy and everything to do with the way that you run your ticketing solution. Like, if you have 3-day SLA, you are understaffed. You need a better ticketing platform. There's lots of things that you need. It has nothing to do with Andy.
2 things about this that I'm going to react to. One is just don't do a survey if you don't care. Because that's the way. Now I want to throw the phone, I want to throw the computer, I want to go visit your office and strangle you. Don't pretend and then do that. And then the other is, if I was running that contact center, I would go through an experience like that myself, and then I would take the C-suite and say, okay, here's what we do to our customers. And I just don't think there's anybody, I hope, there's nobody at a high level of management who saw that would say, yeah, that's how we roll.
It's baffling when I see things like that, where like you were mentioning, like the working hours and things like that, where it's like the resolution timeline doesn't count like Sunday and weekends, or whatever, like it doesn't do that. But there's a worse mismatch than that, I think, when we're thinking about like there's nowhere in their system that says like 40 days, right? For me, like nowhere in their system says like Christina message April 13th and then May 30th. Like, no, I don't think so. So like that kind of thing makes it really easy for this to slide under the radar, I think. But a lot of that kind of like, the thing that I always think about, and you guys are probably similar, I would ask if you guys feel this way, but I will make the time because it is good for research. But it's also, like I now know how messed up this situation is, and I know what I need to do to kind of like squeeze in the cracks and like get my voice heard. But the average person's not going to do that. They're going to get impatient. They're basically going to be like, you know what, never mind. I don't have time for this. And that's what makes me the most angry, is that you need to be like, you have to have a PhD in contact center in order to get anything done in some of them.
Yeah. I think I already have the answer to my question before even asking, but I'm going to try. Did you get any feedback at all following any of the surveys you've answered? Or the chief appeasement officer is actually the answer to the survey?
I don't know if it was an answer to a survey because he responded to an older ticket, but he knew what was wrong. He seemed to have an appreciation for how long I waited and like all of these different things. And then they were all obviously like ready to fix it. And then as a result of all of that, they sent me one final survey to say like, did we like fix your experience with us? And I didn't answer that one because I didn't deserve it.
I think, honestly, Julien, keep me honest here. I think we're hitting something that 3.5 years into CX therapy I haven't seen before, which is having all these autonomous email experiences and allowing internally for really just preventing the company to be able to see the picture of that because they were all broken up. I can't think of another experience, at least where it's this extreme of that.
That is true. I think in 3.5 years, first of all, we've had very few stories with ticketing, which is why I was asking the question,
yeah,
is ticketing still a thing? But even when we have ticketing, we usually don't have that problem because I never had the experience of people, or at least not that I can remember, people closing the tickets immediately. Because here's a problem, it's not so much a ticket, which in itself is not great strategy, but if you keep it open and you keep the conversation going and you don't wait for 3 days in between responses, it's acceptable. It's not good, it's not great, but it's acceptable.
I understand how that works, and I've used email before, right? Like it takes that long to get like back and forth done in email, and I can accept that.
Exactly. So, but you're right. That I think that's the first story of that was not sharing any brand or anything, but was it like a small local store or was it like a big national brand?
Well, it's probably like not a big brand. It's I don't think they have any brick and mortar stores. I think they're only e-commerce, or at least that's what I think.
That's why they're so good on e-commerce.
So I mean, I ended up going online to be like, is it just me? And there was a bunch of people shouting about it on Reddit about how bad their customer support was and giving each other tips on how to fix it and like, or how to like get their things resolved. And it was just like, if that's what happens when you Google like company name customer service, it's just like people having like a support group conversation, like a therapy conversation on Reddit. Like, yeah, this is your fault. It's your fault.
Wow. So just a minute on what could be done to fix it, and a minute on what could other brands do first to make sure they don't do the same thing and to prevent this from ever happening in the future. What are your thoughts, Christina?
Yeah, there's two things that I think would be, one of them is like a little bit more philosophical. So there's just more of like a way that they have to think about some of their metrics. And part of it is just that recognizing that resolution is not up to you. Like whether the issue was resolved is up to the customer. And you guys were talking about the like 68% FCR, that sort of thing, and whether or not, things were resolved. And I think like my experience is obviously like egregiously bad, but even in the case that I called my bank one time and wanted to change my last name to my new married last name and this and that. And I'm sure by the end of that, they thought like, we resolved it. She called about this and we answered her. But I never changed it. I still never changed it. And like, to me, going to the branch of like my marriage certificate and all this stuff, like I might as well just cancel my credit card and just do something else. Like that is kind of like my personal resolution because I'm just like not that kind of person. When you think about like, if you've handed the ball back to the customer, is it resolved? Do they still have to do a task? Like the issue isn't still resolved. I understand there's things to measure from like internal efficiency. Like there's things that you need to measure from that perspective. But I think that they could do a lot better by recognizing that there's like the customer's perception of resolution might be different than yours, and finding a way to measure that. There's no metric I'm aware of, but like just getting closer to reality. And the other thing I think is, if you need to do email, if you want to do email, maybe you have customers that prefer that. Maybe it just makes more sense from like you have more than a bunch of different people involved and whatever. I think that there needs to be a very strict process and just honestly like observation on how that tends to work. If the kinds of issues that you tend to have are like bopping back and forth like a couple of quick responses, and it's not like, okay, I have to go get you this and like send you a file and do all of this complicated stuff, you shouldn't be using email. That's not the right use case for you. Think about a different channel. Like at the end of the day, I'm certain that running phone would be cheaper for them, and that's not typical. but running phone would be cheaper for this particular company. So just like right sizing or right channeling your approach to make sure that it's like fitting the reality of what's coming in the contact center. There's no way that email is efficient for these people. They don't know how to do it.
To your first point, what I've seen as best practice so far, especially when it comes to messaging channel and all of that, where you never really know when the conversation is over. What I've seen work pretty well is sending a final message when you assume that the problem has been solved, asking, can you either confirm, otherwise within 24 or 48 hours, we'll consider the problem is fixed and you're happy with the resolution. So if the person responds, then the ticket continues or the conversation continues. And if they do not, 48 hours later is closed, case closed. Now is, our FCR rate, now is our completion rate, and now we can move on to the next conversation. Definitely skipping the line for people who are already within a conversation.
Yeah. If we're live, I'm first. I'm first, please.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. This is crazy. And what Max was saying earlier, drink your own potions at some point. You have to test your own contact center and figure out what it is you're putting your customers through. This is pretty insane.
One Max, of the things that's really interesting from that first point that you said, where the idea of being able to kind of like prompt them and send a message, what I'm seeing from an AI perspective is like there's certain kinds of conversations that if I say, hey, can you give me my boarding pass? And the bot does, you did what they asked. Like you can make a really safe inference that like, requested, received. This was a task and there was like a thing that needed to be delivered. If it's a little bit more nebulous than that, I think that your strategy works to kind of like to work between the lines there. But I think that there's something to be said about acknowledging like, what are they asking me and did you do the thing? Because you can do some analysis to determine that at least.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. It makes
Max, some closing thoughts and personal wisdom.
I just want to, maybe between us, we can catalog every bit of epic fail here. I'll start and see how many I can get. Wrong channel.
Yep.
Complete meltdown of metrics. Because whatever they're measuring clearly is forcing all kinds of horrible behavior. Surveying when you truly don't care what the answer is. And clearly an upper management that has no interest in the customer experience whatsoever. What else am I missing? I think there's probably even more than that.
I think just the thing that I would add to the survey piece is just like, don't just ask me about the agent. I might be mad about your process. I might have feedback about something else. I might not be mad about the agent at all. They might be wonderful, but I just don't like what you did. They're just following orders in some cases, right? So I think there's a little bit of nuance to give your folks or give your customers some room to give you feedback on more than just the agent, because they don't hold all the rules.
I had a very similar experience where the agent was great.
Yeah.
And the request I had, I felt was completely reasonable, but I was denied. So, I'm going to get you. And I then surveyed, like, okay, here we go. All they asked me about was the agent. And it was so, to this day, I vividly remember wanting to throw the phone across the room when that happened. It's horrid.
I would add to your long list poor supervisor management. I mean, it feels really random. And I understand in most contact center at this point, the supervisor has to be a little bit random because they don't necessarily have the tools to detect problems. Hopefully AI is going to solve some of that. But here it really feels like, hey, it's on trial 52 that the supervisor by luck suddenly find that specific ticket and decide to help me out. Would have been better if it was on the third one, not the 50th one.
And also, like when I start using all the keywords, like the maniac, like escalation keywords, just like I'm there, like filling it to the brim with all the synonyms. Like I want to talk to your boss, supervisor, escalation. I'm really angry. I'm doing my best, but I shouldn't have taken all that time. Yeah,
exactly. And the appeasement piece is, I mean, it's great. A gesture is always good, but is that the right gesture? Is that the right keywords? Is that the right timing? And was it 10% on your existing order or 10% if you ever come back to shop with them?
So I did buy the lights because I like them. I like the lights. It took us like 5 years to pick lights. So I'm like, I'm buying them. And I already have the damn bulbs. So I have the bulbs for these lights, right? So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to order the lights. They gave me free shipping, which was $100. And so free shipping, but then 10% off of the new order of the lights, which was the most expensive part of the order anyway. So I'm not like mad about that. So I got a little bit of a benefit in the end that I'm not displeased about. I would have not ordered it if they didn't give me that at least, but I think I would have traded the 10% for not having wasted a month of my life.
So usually after people tell us a story, I ask them, do you feel better now that you've shared the story? But in your case, you still have not received the light.
No.
And there's still a tiny chance that something goes wrong with delivery and you may need to contact them again. So I'm not sure if I should ask the question or not.
I'm pretty sure I will turn into a demon if they come broken and I have to deal with them again. Like that is, I will become possessed by some kind of demon. But in absence of that, I am pleased enough to purchase the thing that I wanted in the first place. I will never shop with them again.
Sounds like the wise thing to do.
Yeah.
Well, Christina, thank you so much for sharing the pain with us. We appreciate. Hopefully you feel slightly better and everything's going to go smooth. So at the end of the
my husband's had to listen to me, so it was nice to be able to talk to other people about it. I think he's happy also.
I love that. Well, Christina, a big thank you. Max, thank you as usual. And for everyone watching, if you have questions, follow up for Christina's stories, tips, ideas, suggestion, whatever it is, we're waiting. The mailbag is waiting for you guys. Now, you know, it can be by email if you wanted to. We take less than 3 days to respond. It can be by LinkedIn. It can even be by fax if you end up finding Max's number. Whatever method is fine with us. Thank you so much for watching and wish you all have a beautiful rest of your day. Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.